The next panel, The Data Advantage, will begin right away. Please welcome to the stage Zachary Anderson, Samir Gupta, Rinesh Patel, and your moderator, Ryan Heath.
Good morning, everyone. We are here to talk about AI and data. There is no AI without data, so we're going to get into how to structure it, the most efficient and secure ways to store it, to house it, how AI is going to affect data governance, and what are the new sort of use cases that are now being driven as more and more banks get advanced in their adoption of AI. I'm going to start with the really tough questions. Zach, can you kick us off and tell us a little bit about your role and how it relates to applying AI to your data?
Well, my role right now is father. I'm on paternity leave for the next 20 weeks or so. So that's about what I'm thinking about. When I'm working for the bank, I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer and overseeing AI and personalization and open banking and a few things in that area. So.
And you were ramping that up years before ChatGPT hit us? Or
yeah,
you were racing to catch up?
I started at the bank in 2020, just before COVID, and we started actually developing our AI platform and our personalization strategy at that time. So.
Samir, yeah, you've come all the way from Singapore. Tell us a little bit about how it's going at DBS.
Hi, so I'm the Chief Analytic Officer at DBS. I've been in this role since 2017 when the role was created. We had recognized that AI and data are going to be key competitive advantages at that time. So we've been working on, now I would say, the third wave with Gen AI on the AI and data strategy.
And Rinesh, Snowflake, you've got a different role in the ecosystem. Tell us about how you're working with folks like Samir and Zach.
Absolutely. So Rinesh Patel, I look after financial services for Snowflake, a cloud data and AI platform, really enabling customers to build a data and AI strategy, effectively leveraging some of the infrastructure that cloud provides. And really in the last, I've been at Snowflake for 3 years now, and we decided about 3 years ago to verticalize our platform, really make it speak intentionally to financial services, across the spectrum of asset management, banking, and so forth, and really be laser focused on their needs, their goals, their outcomes, and make sure those investments are lined up to support them. So really good to be here. I've spent a bit of time at the Evident New York event a few months ago, so really interested in this conversation today.
Excellent. Zach, can we talk a little bit about the design considerations that go into your data strategy? Do the classic techniques, we're talking data warehouses, data lakes, is that going to work as more and more AI is integrated? And what do you think of managing less structured data? Like, is AI able to process that sort of data, or are you in a race to get it all in a readable format?
I mean, I think, the data strategy hasn't essentially changed. I mean, we're a 300-year-old bank. I run every database technology that's ever been created is still operating at NatWest. I'm engineering-wise responsible for a good portion of them, luckily not DB2 and Fortran and some things like that. But that's kind of the starting place, is where do you start from? What's your technology infrastructure? What does your data look like? How siloed is it? I think what's changed probably, there's kind of two competing trends, I think, in my mind, that are changing and influencing our data strategy. So one is the integration that's happening on the technology side between database and interface and consumption of the data. So the creation of Microsoft Fabric, obviously the work that Snowflake's been doing, Databricks, Amazon has their own tool set where you can access data using basically any language and any scripting process you want, whether that's Python or Spark or whatever, and then you can access the data where it resides. And I think that's the one shift that's happening, all of the kind of separate from AI.
And that must be an advantage. You go back 300 years.
Yeah,
so
I think
you don't lose that anymore.
That's going to be a serious advantage for everybody. And then I think on top of that, we've got evolving regulation. For us, that really drives, how resilient we are, use cases, and how much we're doing to anonymize the data depending on the use cases. And then the third piece now is generative AI, I think, separate from those, which then enables us to think about different sets of data, unstructured data, call log data, visual data, those kinds of things that I think we're having. That is an adjustment that we've probably made more of in the last 2 years since ChatGPT, or maybe a little. We were lucky enough that our scouting team kind of connected us with OpenAI about 12 months before ChatGPT launched, so we were already working with them some. And so we were thinking about unstructured data a little earlier, but the result has been, I think we have been thinking about larger sets of data that will be valuable for the bank over time, even if we're not using them now, and how do we bring those and make them available for us. So. And
just one more follow-up, how valuable is that sort of ground level relationship with a foundation model provider like OpenAI? So I'm at a legal tech provider, Robin AI, and we were Anthropic's first enterprise partner. And that feels like a big advantage to us. Do you feel like you have a different and better relationship because it's so long-standing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we definitely benefit from relationships with almost all the major LLM providers, whether that's and the hyperscalers, and we've taken that as a really deliberate strategy. I think we're way too early in that game to make a call on what's going to be important and where they're going to be. We can all look at trends and try to prepare for those, but we're probably all wrong. And so better to have, at the scale of a big bank, we can play, better to do it twice and get it wrong once than to do it once and get it wrong once, right? So.
The invention of the humble banker here on stage. I love to see.
Well, I spent 20 years in video games where we only had about a 30% hit rate before I came to banking, so I'm pretty used to failing at data and technology questions. So.
Excellent. Samir, is it looking similar to you all at DBS, or is it a different picture being based in APAC?
So let me put it in context. So when we started off our AI and data journey, it was not about data. It was really about driving outcomes from data and AI. So that was the big focus. And we were very clear that there are 3 big things we need to do if we are to be successful in that. One is we need to really scale up and make the use of data and AI pervasive in all parts of the bank. Because banks suffer from this pilot to death, but never to production scenario, right? Second thing, we said that to be able to scale up, we need to make the time and effort it takes to deploy these solutions and continuously reduce them and do that. Because typically in banking, for a host of reasons, any of these solutions from design to when we started off, it probably took us 12 to 18 months. So we said we need to really industrialize if we need to scale up.
I think mine was 24 months when I started in 2020 to get a model from initial idea to live. That was our benchmark.
So our benchmark was slightly slower. Maybe we're a smaller bank. We don't have 300 years of history.
24 months. I think mine was. You were faster. Actually.
And then the third thing was really about that we need to be clear on driving impact from all this investment. And we were also clear that to drive that impact, we need to change the way we work. If you just put in a model or an AI solution, but don't change the processes, the people, the culture, the adoption, you're not going to get any impact. So that was what we set out to do. As we set out to do that, obviously a big part of it was the data strategy. And we were very clear, even in 2017, we laid out a data strategy which was really around capabilities to say, look, we want to make the data discoverable. That means metadata, lineage, anybody in the bank can access, because most of the time was spent in trying to figure out what that data is. I mean, we probably have 2 million attributes in our warehouse. Maybe 100,000 are just revenue. Nobody knows. Every revenue is different, but nobody knows what that revenue is. So we set out to say, look, let's make that metadata, lineage, make it discoverable. Second, we said, let's have role-based access. Every party, based on their role, should have access to the data that they need for their role. And therefore, how do you design for that? Third, we said that we need to make sure that we secure the data in the right way. But we don't encrypt all the data, but more sensitive data, we encrypt and do that. Fourth, we said as part of the technology platforms, we need to give flexibility, like you said, different tools for different people. And now, even for the same roles, people prefer some other tools. How do you do that? And the fifth, we said that all of this will keep changing, and therefore we need to have a very modular view. to be able to drop in. So that was our broad design principles around it. We've never focused on the model. Actually, even with Gen AI, these principles remain the same. The challenges are different because it unlocks the power of unstructured data. And structured data, at least banks from a governance standpoint, have spent 50 years of locking down that thing. So we had to spend a lot of time unlocking it. Unstructured data, actually, it's actually even messier than structured data in the bank. It's more massive, more messier, but the design principles remain the same. So we are working through the same things around it. From an LLM standpoint, we are very clear that LLM is just such a small part. I mean, it's less than 5% of an overall solution that drives value. So we probably in the past, or because of the big focus on Gen AI, LLM, there is too much noise on LLM. Actually, LLM is just a small part. All these other parts need to be. So we are thinking through all the other ecosystem, the parts, to make sure it's an end-to-end solution.
Now, Rinesh, I think Samir was hinting at this point. The tech is often ahead of people, and change management is a huge component of how you actually get AI adopted. How much are you pushing the tech, and how much are you meeting your customers where they are, which is, not always racing along at the same speed as the tech?
Yeah, I think from a design principle perspective to the question earlier, I think it's very consistent. I think most customers are really trying to remove those technology bottlenecks of data access, data discovery, data identification, as more complex questions internally and externally are asked for, and enable an organization to share that data in a governed and secure way. And I think the principles that you laid out were pretty accurate across most organizations, i.e. a scalable platform architecture that enables sharing internally and externally, the ability to be able to support data identification, cataloging, lineage, and so forth, the ability to support data models, right? Proprietary data models, third-party data models, large language models, the ability to put in place controls. You mentioned entitlements, whether it's RBAC controls, role-based access controls, or whether it's attribute-based controls. The ability to control sensitive data and third-party data is crucial. And then resilience. I think what we're going to see is a lot more focus on operational resiliency in the cloud. And I think those dimensions are broadly going to be the same when you think about AI. And I think what organizations will quickly start doing is thinking about integrating AI strategically across the data lifecycle. And that's where I think you'll see a convergence of the data and the AI strategies kind of come together as the hype distills. And from a Snowflake perspective, and generally across the vendor landscape, you'll see a convergence of technologies. Organizations taking their modern data platforms, embedding in their rich AI capabilities to support the ability to manage those models, host those models, run those models across a governed data perimeter. And that's kind of certainly what we will be advocating to our customers.
Thinking specifically about that new AI layer in the data strategy, and maybe I'll come to you first on this one, Samir. How much do you have the space under this hype pressure from the board and the general environment and the need to make the timeline be really compressed now? How much do you feel able to just properly assess how much you need to add AI into your systems versus needing to serve up to these other stakeholders that you're definitely doing AI and you're definitely succeeding with it?
So everyone starts with, I want AI. You ask them, why do you want AI? You have so little data. I mean, a lot of times those are the conversations. But because our focus is on outcomes, and that outcomes is co-owned by not just the data and AI teams, but by the business team. So therefore, that conversation is very... But one of the things we've been doing is we've been looking through the whole, and both in the past, looking through the whole model lifecycle or AI solution lifecycle, to deliver outcomes, what are the components that we need to have, including change management, process change, and work through that aspect. With Gen AI, we are doing the same. And it's almost like a two-tier approach. Very quickly, we need to get POCs and what we call MVP ones out to demonstrate whether it can even work on a small scale, whether it gives you the lift that you're looking at. Have you understood what process changes and people changes you need to do? Because a lot of times it becomes conceptual if you don't put it out there, for example, in front of RMs or in front of contact center. And that piece, we have a lot of pressure on getting it out quickly. On once we have success, then the pressure is implementation. Again, we take an MVP view every 2 months or every few weeks. What is the release that we are doing? In parallel, we have been able to convince our board and also our senior management that we need to drive this whole program on AI industrialization. So when we started off, like I said, it was 12 to 18 months that we were looking at deployment. Now we are down to 2 to 3 months, in some cases 2 to 3 weeks. And our goal is to bring it to weeks. So we did that for all the machine learning structured data. We are now working through and saying these are the investments we need to make in place, even for unstructured and for Gen AI. A lot of that is looking through each part of the life cycle, building reusable asset and building components that people can, it's almost like a Lego block, leverage, use, and do it. And that requires, it's not a technology play. Actually, yes, technology is important, but it is at the end of the day, change management. Because even my data scientists, I have 250 data scientists, everybody wants to be a Picasso. Everybody wants to do bespoke because anything new they do. Whereas we've changed it to say your incentive structure is really about how much you reuse and how much you contribute to the reusable asset. So, which is a very, very significant shift because in the long run, we expect to have, right now I have 350 AI use cases delivering this year close to 700 million of economic benefit. Next year I will look to double it. Similarly with Gen AI, I think in the next few years we will be at 1,000 use cases. I'm not going to get 10x the number of people. So how do we really do that both from an effort and time? So that's the big shift that we are doing. So we've been lucky to be able to work with our board to say we need both two-pronged. Yep. We will go quick with the MVPs, but they won't scale up to that extent, and we will deliver this AI industrialization.
Those are some impressive numbers. If NatWest was matching it, there'll be 6 new AI tools before your paternity leave.
I think that's probably true. I mean, I think 3 have gone live while I've been off in the last 3 weeks.
Okay.
It's interesting. I mean, I think we both benefit that we started an AI and data journey very early. So, I mean, over the last 4 years, I think I've added 1,800 data scientists, ML ops people, data engineers to NatWest, net new. And that, you know, if we were just reacting to ChatGPT, you couldn't do that. Yeah. We also have been in a very similar journey with our partnership with AWS around SageMaker to implement that over the last 3 years and take our model lifecycle from what's 24 months on average to now more like 90 days, and to speed that up. And I think you're exactly right. It's about like going through every part of that process. I'd say what's happened recently to me and what I've been talking to the leadership team about is I don't know that to put into production at a bank and a governed with model management and all those things, those processes we're still optimizing and improving at the back end. What the generative AI solutions, I think, are doing is POC or alpha is really compressed. Now, that was often gather data, do a bunch of work, and that was still a kind of big chunk of the process. Now I think that's much more compressed. And so you can get to a prototype that you can put in front of the customers in a couple of weeks now. And that has to change the decision-making process. In a couple of cases, we were with a prototype with, say, our relationship managers using it and testing it, but we only had a quarterly investment cycle. And so we actually had to change the investment cycle around the AI, around data, and around technology investment in order to accommodate the shift in AI. So I think what's been interesting as we've adapted to generative AI and some of these other tools is they're tools, but what they've done is they've accelerated certain parts of this. They've accelerated the time to value or the time to proof, and then we can quickly do it. So what we're doing now is very similar. We have 400 use cases identified, 100 prioritized, a bunch in development and rolling to production as we go along. I think we have started something like, I was just looking at the numbers to try to refresh them, but we've started something like 50 SageMaker projects this quarter, which is kind of a crazy number. So like those things is what's happening is the data strategy essentially is becoming get to proof of concept as fast as you can, see if there's value. If not, shift really fast, move that team over, and start another one. And actually, interestingly, I'd say the only other thing is we're definitely, these are not, when you're self-building a gradient boosting model or something like that as a solution for a fraud use case, the costs are actually relatively low. Now if you're using OpenAI and not self-hosting Claude, actually the per call costs are quite high.
Yep.
So the business cases are shifting. So we're spending a lot more time figuring out, like, all right, where are the sweet spot? What model should we be using? What balance between quality and outcomes? And then often, like, what I like is once in a while our teams are doing some funny things. Like, you can use generative AI to do a classification model, and you can get there pretty fast. But actually, it's kind of a terrible use case for a classification model. So much better to actually use, a traditional classification machine learning model. It's really cheap. You can run it really fast. It's quite efficient, and actually, it gets to better outcomes and doesn't hallucinate. But you can't do that in 2 weeks. Yep. So you can almost test kind of things and then say, all right, this will work. The customers like it. Now let's break it down and go rebuild it, and we can build a traditional AI model in that space. So I think those things are kind of shifting some of the strategy and how we execute it in interesting ways, fun ways, I think.
Now, Rinesh, how is this sort of time pressure and this massive turnover of ideas that your customers and potential customers are facing? How does that change what you're trying to optimize for them?
Yeah, I think strategically, customers are reorientating themselves. I think what you're seeing is an acceptance that AI is more than just a chatbot or a co-pilot. I think there's an acceptance that customers want a strategic outcome from the investments that they're making. More so when you think about margin pressures, more so when you think about the cost takeout programs that I think a lot of organizations will start entering into. So they're really looking for improved efficiency, productivity gains. And if you think about that and the spectrum of use case and requirements that are going to come in, I think most organizations are increasingly thinking about AI strategically, i.e., to Samir's point, appending AI to the data strategy, the enterprise data strategy across that life cycle. So what does that mean? When you think about ingestion, AI, large language models, has accelerated the collection of unstructured data, whether it's text, whether it's audio, whether it's videos, and so forth. But that also means a patchwork of different data types and different data schemas coming together, which means a lot of errors. So you've really got to think about how do you embed AI at the head end. And if you think about that, that allows organizations to really improve the data quality because you've got effectively the data types and the data schemas kind of coming together. We're already seeing organizations leverage data AI at the head end to remove null values, to improve data quality for ESG, as an example. When you think about from the transformation perspective, it's more than moving just data into the cloud or migrating a data warehouse to the cloud. These chaps will tell you they have to build semantic models. They have to de-silo the data. They have to support pervasive use cases. And when you think about that, AI will make that more efficient and accurate. And when you think about governance, I think you'll see a pivot away from traditional data governance towards model governance, towards usage governance. Again, supporting a more the pivot towards responsible AI. So I think it becomes more strategic. It becomes embedded across the data lifecycle. And the aim is really, if you do that, you improve your data quality, but you also improve the outcomes as a consequence.
One of the things we didn't talk about that I just think is an interesting one that we might just raise, and you talked about a lot of the back-end processes with AI coming up, but I think I have this nagging question, and you'll have to bear with me since I'm on paternity leave, but I have this nagging question of, are we finally going to democratize data using AI? Like, you can see what Q and Copilot and some of these things are doing in terms of generating BI on the fly and having people, these what I would call talk to data use cases, I think are really interesting. They're still pretty early. But
so internal democracy, changing who can engage.
I feel like my entire career we've been talking about citizen data scientists and citizen statisticians before that, and democratizing data access, and it's a lot better than it has ever been. But Tableau and all the tools never quite worked in the way we really wanted. Now I think there is, the ability to for a frontline person to be able to ask in their Teams or their Looker, or one of their chat interfaces a data question and get an answer back from a bot feels pretty close.
I think so. I think that's as a consequence of the huge investment and innovation in search.
Yeah.
Right. That was the missing component. Now you're seeing search being brought in, connecting data models, connecting data schemas, different data types, and what you then get is natural language question and answer solutions.
Yeah.
And I think
and
that
build graphs.
Exactly. And I think that is the component that was missing. That means if you think about your Tableau dashboard or whatever it may be, you can already see a very different interface for a non-technical business audience that starts evolving very, very quickly.
And that then works back into the things that you were talking about, like RBA, role-based access, and all these things have to be
That's right.
fully
Sort them out
integrated.
before you do
You have to sort them out, because otherwise you've got little pools that you can talk to, but that's much less valuable.
That's right.
And so I think that's the interesting thing that's going to change the data strategies is we're going to look again at democratization of the data inside of even large governed organizations like ours. But it forces a whole bunch of other things to be rethought too.
Let's talk about mix of models for a second. At the surface public level debate, there's obviously a huge amount of attention to ever more powerful models and the race towards AGI. But it's certainly my view that in regulated industries, and you're among them, you don't need AGI, at least not now. You need very specialized intelligence. So how much do you want to pull in the most powerful models, and how much are you continuing to build your own models or fine-tuning versions of those powerful models for very specific banking use cases?
So it's a mixture. And frankly, we go on the basis of the use case, the impact, the feasibility. Because there's no point putting in a very fancy, even the fanciest model, when your impact is very low. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, like I said, the model itself is 5% of the potential. You can get the same impact with a lot less value. So it's horses for courses kind of scenario. There is so much opportunity in the banking space to drive efficiency, drive effectiveness, using existing tools and using what's coming out on the LLM and the pace. That, I'm like astounded just by making sure that are we getting the best out? And as new things, so I think the key for us is a modular architecture to be able to swap in and swap out. Because we don't know which horses will you take a bet on, like Zach said, we want to, big enough banks, we want to try a lot. We want to try our own. We want to try vectorization. We want to try RAGs, a lot of that, so that at the end of the day, it is really the use case and what you're solving for that drives a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I agree completely. And that's where we're at too.
Yep.
We're hosting our own, fine tuning, building our own, what we would call small language models. I think the only thing I'd say is there's definitely a cost optimization and a mix to it too. So in some cases, we're using multiple models and then direct, or not even models, but just basic, great like Elasticsearch capabilities to generate outcomes, but in a chat interface. So, how you orchestrate multiple models and guardrails and a few other things together actually can give you quite a nice package that's a little more complicated, but much more cost effective, or a little simpler in terms of governance, because obviously if you have to explain how an outcome or a response is generated with an LLM, that's harder than an Elasticsearch, right? So, or anything in between. So I think it's definitely each use case in our space we're thinking about, but I think it's really important, it's interesting at the lead, it's really important to be researching all of those pieces. Yeah. If we're not doing research, which we definitely are on our own hosted, on, with Claude, with the meta models, with everything that's publicly available, then I think you miss steps. Mm-hmm. And so to us, it's actually a strategic choice to be doing research projects or or testing the use of models or graph actually as embeddings as opposed to just vector. In all these cases, so that we're really exploring and can learn from them, because there's so much cross portability. And once you figure out something in one space, say, we're doing work on fraud with graph, which we've been doing for a long time, but now the generative models make that really, really exciting. That allows us to take that and say, actually in, say, a relationship management case, graph works really well too, and we can port that over there and have the architecture there. So I think it's important to be, at this stage, it's better to have 2 or 3 than 1 for sure, because I think you learn from each of them, and we're learning the limits and capabilities of each of them. And there's nothing like doing it yourself to see what's really going on under the hood.
And we certainly see the same. I think as there is a pivot away from broad to domain-specific questions, I think what you'll find is that landscape kind of change. Rather than, as you said, rather than betting on a single horse on a rapidly evolving landscape, I think most customers will have access to a variety of models, best-of-breed models for the different use cases, be it open source, be it proprietary, be it external commercial large language models that that speak intelligently to their data and third-party data to be able to converse. I think what you'll find is for customers really focusing on taking away those administrative bottlenecks of evaluating models, of tuning them, of hosting them, and provisioning GPU to really just solve for the use case. I think that would be the first dimension. So an architecture that's best of breed. The second is around, to your point, efficiency. I think it's really about how do you make the deployment of large language models efficient, cost efficient, secure, and governed. And I think there's a real focus on not setting up separate vector databases, not having siloed governance, not having to navigate separate security postures, and then a focus really on data, right? A lot of investment in data, trusted, rich, governed data, internal and third party, that's then accessible to your large language models, your co-pilots, or whatever it may be. I think those are the 3 things that we're going to see a lot of focus on as customers adapt their architecture.
The governance point is a very good one to now switch to, I would say. Okay, banking, very clear. Data has been well governed, strictly governed for a long time. But my guess is that you might tell me AI is making that a little bit more complicated these days. At Robin, we get a private copy of Claude. We can make sure, we can say to our customers, we're not training Claude is not benefiting from your data. We're keeping it all within our AWS cloud environment. Is that the sort of guarantee you want to be saying to your customers and your stakeholders? What other governance considerations have you had to bring into the strategy recently?
So I guess I think the whole governance part, so there are some data governance standards which continue to be, right? Data quality, data lineage, this data discoverability, all those will continue to be important. I think the whole element of responsible data use, and the way we think about it, there are 3 big parts to the responsible data use. One is, can you use the data? Which is the question of so that's one of the biggest challenges with the LLM. We don't know what data it's been trained on. Most of the guys cannot share that. So that question is out there. Can we use the data? And maybe somebody can certify we can use it, and the regulator says, yeah, so maybe. The second question is, even if you can, should you use the data? Which is a much more internal, more around the ethics of it, our own purpose and doing that. The third question is how we use the data, which is really the model governance piece. Now, in the past, with machine learning models, we figured out a way to do model governance and in a structured manner. Now, as we look forward, and that's one of the things that really worries me over the next 3 years, we will have 1,000 solutions which are leveraging LLMs, machine learning models, all of that together. In a lot of cases, combinations of them and multiple combinations of them. How do you govern them? How do you monitor them? How do you even do it in an efficient manner? Because it's all okay right now if you have 30 cases or for 50 use cases that are doing. But if each use case has 50 models and then you have to continuously monitor through all of that, I think as an industry and not just banking, that's the challenge to solve. Because if you don't solve it, we will get stuck in a quagmire And we will have to unwind a lot, especially in a regulated industry. I mean, we are already discussing with our regulators in some of our jurisdiction in terms of some of the model governance regulation or expectation that they're going to set. We are working closely with them to understand. They also don't understand, but regulators, when they don't understand, they will still ask for what they want, irrespective of whether you can deliver or
what they had from the previous thing.
Yes. So that's going to be a big
What's
challenge.
that like in Singapore? It's a quite small environment where you're almost sitting next to the regulators on a daily basis.
That way we are lucky. Our regulator is very progressive. We work very closely. Actually, we've come out with a paper at an industry and a regulator level together called MindForge, looking through all the risks associated with Gen AI, and we did the same with AI in terms of tooling. So in that sense, we've been but they have as yet not prescribed their expectation. All these papers are great because they just are listing down everything. We are waiting for them to prescribe what their expectation is. But
that also means everything is a potential problem for you because they haven't ruled anything out.
Potentially, yes, and that's what is going to move. But in a sense, the regulator there is quite pragmatic and works closely with the industry to kind of work through what are the real. I mean, for them also, the key is where are the real risks. You can create a lot of checklists, but not actually address the real risk, and that's a real problem.
I mean, in some ways, the EU legislation, I think, has been really powerful in that it works back from outcomes and use cases and cares less about how you implemented those, which I think which is useful. First, I agree. I'd say I think the biggest changes recently around data governance. So, I mean, obviously, privacy, lineage, quality, all those things continue to be true, and the systems that the banks have set up are generally pretty good at those things. I think the new ones are ethics. Not that we didn't have ethical considerations before on how we use data, but I think we're treading into putting the models and the data closer to the customer and more automated, often now with human checks in proximity to the customers, and that requires us to think more about the ethics. And so actually we've stood up a AI ethics committee and a data ethics committee and trained all of our staff at the bank on data ethics through mandatory training, and in addition to quality and lineage and all of the other things. And so I think you definitely have to invest more in the ethical consideration now than we've ever had to do before.
And are there, I mean, adjacent to that, the liability questions? So I'm certainly of the view that any AI system is going to hallucinate at some point. And the question isn't, is AI perfect, but can it be net useful in comparison to the best humans involved in the process? But, there is liability associated with mistakes. So there are those things to think through as well.
Well, I mean, I think the world is still trying to figure out AI, especially generative AI liability. But in the end, I think, again, it's use cases. So it's one thing for it to hallucinate in a process to generate, copy for an advertising script. It's another for it to hallucinate in a loan decision. So we have to think about each of those use cases and every single use case we have and build appropriate controls and guardrails to that, and also check the ethics and the quality of data going into it. All of those things are required at every step. I think the thing you brought up is also interesting in that machine learning operations is a pretty new field in AI overall. It's really, we've been talking about it for like 6 or 7 years now. But generative AI has put it definitely at the forefront of my mind. And so we're talking with our ML ops engineers a lot about how do they monitor and manage all these models that are going into production, and really build that in a systematic way. And I think that's, I think about it, when I started, we didn't even have a data science name for things. I was an economist, a statistician, an advanced analytics person, those kind of things. And what's really happened is I think the industry of AI and data has become a software and technical industry now. We're code writers. And so that professionalization and ML ops is just another form of that. We all monitor APIs through pings. We monitor our mainframes, second by second. We monitor our compute usage in lots of different ways. And now we're just applying that same rigor to models as we go forward. And the spread and breadth of those models are now more complicated, but let's be honest, it's not like a bank's transaction system is particularly simple, and it gets monitored really well. So we just need to take all those tools that have been developed for monitoring complex computer systems over the last 80 years and apply those to models now, as opposed to thinking of them as like a statistical process that we just, is done by a guru in a back room. Now it's really a productionalized, professionalized, industrial process that we monitor, and that's fine. Yeah, I don't think it's not hard. It just takes a mindset shift for a data scientist or somebody building a model from, I do this once and then I hand it off to somebody and I walk away. Now there's a real process around it. So.
Another mindset shift is it's time for a couple of audience questions. The gentleman here in the second row, and there's another guy in the middle there. Maybe stand up. We're bringing a microphone to you, and if you say who you're representing so the panelists have some context. Up the front here. Oh, no, sorry, just there.
Good morning, everyone. It's really a fascinating discussion, really enjoyed. My name is Mani Janaki Raman. I'm a product manager within London Stock Exchange Group. The question is around change management. Samir, you mentioned about it. Because you're putting in a lot of models, right? And you said 50 models. How do you ensure that what you learn from one group of people who are experimenting, learn simultaneously, right? So there are some new learnings. How does the learning get applied to the other groups? Because there could be very relevant learnings that could apply immediately rather than make the same mistakes. How do you ensure in such big organizations like NatWest and DBS, what kind of emphasis you have on this?
I think it's a great question, and it's one I'm some of my team's here, and they know I'm pestering them about every day too. And what we've had to do, we've used our traditional methods. So we hold, traditionally we would hold a data science conference a year, and have everybody present, and we'd have a little blog or a Teams chat with everybody working in a particular area. And so we did those kind of things. I'd say what we've had to do is speed them up. So now we're not doing one data science conference a year. We just held an online poster session at mid-year. In addition to our conference, we have an internal blog. We're writing external papers. We're doing a lot of things, but at a faster rate than we've ever done before, just so that people are sharing. And then I think the other thing I've been really using, my initial solution is to use my leadership team a lot more to understand the learnings from every single project and be trying to spread those apart. So it's an interesting shift because I think it's forced me to go much deeper as a leader. I manage 3,000 people, but I sit in about 20 programs, actual Teams chats every day so that I can see what they're learning and see if I can do that. And I'm really challenging all of my leadership team to think about going much deeper because the learnings are happening at a micro level. How you're doing a RAG implementation, how we're doing, what model we're selecting, how we're doing some prompt engineering, how we're talking to a customer about an outcome and getting them comfortable with it. And so I think the learnings right now on generative AI in particular, but AI broadly, are at a lower level than the strategic. So it forces a shift in the leadership team, I think, to go deeper and then make sure that we're spreading those in addition to all the kind of formal mechanisms that we have for our teams to interact.
Rinesh.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, I think history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme, right? I think we've been here before. If you think about cloud, if you think about how we entered into cloud, it was very much a tech-led decision where it was about exiting data centers, cost and efficiency. At the same time, you had data scientists spinning up cloud instances. But if you fast forward to where we are now, pretty much as a cross-functional operating rhythm that exists in most of these organizations where you have the technologists, where you have the lines of business, where you have legal, where you have FinOps. And I think that becomes the mechanism that I think most organizations will orient to very quickly. So I think leveraging some of those things that we've done historically when new technologies have emerged and taking those best practices and embedding them sooner rather than later, I think will help organizations.
Yeah. I guess this is one of the biggest challenges, really, to scale up and reduce the time and effort it takes. And we think of it across three levels. One is around the people part of it. What is in it for each individual? Because all the learning is happening at the individual or team level, but how do you take it up? So that there is that bit about that the individuals are incentivized to learn not to share their learning, but also take others' learning. Everyone's very willing to share their learning, but nobody wants to use somebody else's learning.
Everybody wants to learn on their own.
Yeah. The other is we want to enable processes. So two things we've done is we have made sure each and every data solution is in a workflow tool and a knowledge repository, including going through all the steps, including features that have gone in, the modules that have used, what has happened. So that enables anybody else who's looking to, and it's all searchable and do that. So that third is within that process part is also creating a lot of reusable assets. So it's almost like what Zach was saying, think like a technology, because it's a technology game now. And therefore, how do you create reusable products which in the past would remain as code snippets for data scientists and therefore not get used? So people contribute to it, people leverage it. And the third element is technology. How do you learn from technology? How do you enable? So I think we have not yet cracked it. It's still the biggest thing that we need. If you have to scale up without having a scale up of the number of people, this is the biggest thing that we need to solve.
Yeah.
And we've got one last question. We're going to have to go quickly to that.
A quick question. You mentioned you trained all your bank staff in AI ethics through mandatory training. That sounds like tens of thousands of people. Can you give us some idea of what was
66,000 or something like that? Yeah, I think. I don't know exactly right now how many people are in the bank, but it's in the tens of thousands.
It was kind of like a 1 hour video session.
Yeah. So I mean, we've done it at multiple levels. So when we think about our ethics, our data, and our AI training, we have a basic level that every staff member will see as part of a mandatory training, and that will include thinking about good uses of data, what's appropriate ways to use customers' data, whether that's in a manual process or an AI or an automated process. What does data quality look like? How do you verify the quality of the data that you use before you make your decision on it? How do you document it? All of those kind of things are in our mandatory training. And then you step out a little bit smaller, and we have leaders in the bank who are responsible for data, and like say the COO of one of our businesses, they'll have a more in-depth training, and we'll have done personal things with them. All the boards of our companies have gone through AI immersion sessions. Then we've done we've been a longtime partner with Data Camp, and they've put out some great AI and generative AI training sessions. We've had about 3,000 people go through those, I believe, in the bank. And that's actually open to every member of staff. And then we have a data academy that's more about building models. And that has a curriculum to it. And we've trained a few hundred frontline staff that have actually become data scientists over time. And so we're really investing in the education. I mean, I think and that really gives us two benefits. So one is, it's actually great for our data scientists and for everybody in the bank. We would like everybody in the bank to be AI capable.
Going to have to go to Samir very quickly. Last 30 seconds.
So I guess it's very similar in the sense of we have 3 levels. So basic level, which everyone needs to go through. So that's almost like to join a bank, there are refreshers and all of that. And that's also probably driven by regulators wanting to have refreshers. But that's useful for us in the data side. The second, and all of them are digital, so very short, sharp. Then there is an intermediate level and then an advanced level. And then there is things which are much more for data professionals ourselves. So it's at those 3 levels, but it's a continuous journey that you have to do around that.
Excellent. Zachary, Samir, Rinesh, thank you so much for being fantastic panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions.